Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Case for Construction Culture podcast, balancing safety and profitability. I'm Tom Esch, president of Esch Consulting, and I'm with Nate Ehalt, county administrator from Burnett County, where it's like 10 below zero, Nate, something like that. Welcome to the show.
Yes, it's awfully chilly here this morning. I actually had 25 below zero on my way in.
Woo! That's chilly. Well, hopefully we can warm things up with a conversation about culture, about safety. I do want to note Nate is not a typical guest, and I've known Nate now for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, Nate.
Mhm.
Introduced by Mike Erickson, and very impressed with Nate's thoughtfulness, with his intelligence, with his ability to develop leaders and to do what needs to be done to help people really grow into their capacity and to really shape culture. And even though Nate's not a safety leader, which we often have on the show, you're so thoughtful, Nate, about culture that I want to, welcome you and ask you some questions about how you think about culture. And I guess that's the first question I might ask you is the word culture, right, is a huge word. When I say culture, what do you think sitting there as the key leader in Burnett County and safety is an issue and you're working on highways and you're work on infrastructure and bridges and the whole everything that a county needs to do to function. What are some things you think about and talk about when you hear the word culture?
Yeah, I think it's quite challenging actually for a county because there isn't necessarily one discipline that we have to think about. And so in a county where I help oversee 21 different departments, we have everything from, of course, our highway construction crews, the highway individuals, we got public safety, and then we also have to think about the safety aspects from a psychological standpoint with our child protection workers. So it's a significant variety that we have to think about from a cultural perspective. But the way that I would really look at culture is really more kind of that the intersection of how we function and the experience that then our staff have within that. And I kind of break that down, thinking about our policies that we have in place and our procedures are really the functional pieces.
Hmm.
Do we have policies that help our staff understand ethical decision making, accountable, thinking about their safety that they have to bring forth each and every day, whether it's in our highway department, thinking about their physical safety, or in our CPS, so our Department of Health and Human Services, thinking about psychological safety. And then that experience piece is really, do all those staff within those different departments have a sense of belonging? Do they feel respected? What kind of recognition are they receiving for the work and the services they provide? And then, of course, the benefits and wages that come along with that. And so it's a big topic, culture, but that's kind of how we view it here in Burnett County. We think about it kind of between those two particular lenses.
Brilliant, interesting, and the psychological and the physical safety are so interesting to me because the two are so intertwined. Even on an average construction company, the two are very intertwined. Do people feel they belong? Do they feel that they're going to be safe, emotionally safe, psychologically safe? And having clear structures and good leaders is one of the ways that happens. What are you doing to train or form or develop leaders up there, Nate? So much of this work is driven by leaders. What kinds of things do you think about or do to make sure you're developing leaders who can develop healthy culture?
Yeah, it's something that we really embarked on over the last year and a half or so. And, thanks to you and others that we've been working with,
Hmm.
we really tried to provide additional support to our leaders based upon what they need to be more successful. So, what that looks like is some of them are receiving individual coaching, which has been a huge benefit for those departments that maybe don't necessarily have a background or an academic
Hmm.
experience within culture
Hmm.
and leadership building. And so they're really getting that more hands-on approach with somebody like you, Tom, and others who have that good life experience that they're bringing to the table. And then we're also doing some group coaching up in our HHS department. So starting to not only focus on one individual leader, but leadership teams and how they
Hmm.
function to be more successful as a team, as well as then what they can provide for their individual staff members carrying out the services day in and day out.
Hmm. Do you do training too? Or do you consider the group coaching a kind of training?
I consider that a kind of training, but we do quite a bit of training for the rest of our staff, depending on what particular department they're in, of course.
Mhm. What are you most excited about here as we're launching still fairly early in 2025 with a new political world out there that we're not going to talk about? What are
Thank
you
you. Let's not.
what are you excited about as you look into the year still and dream and plan? You're really a thoughtful leader about planning ahead. I know you are. What are the top things you're excited about here for Burnett County?
Yeah, well, I've been in Burnett County now for just over 11 years, and our mission here is to provide vision and stewardship. And so I really try to think through that lens as I prepare my work for the next year as well as future years. And obviously, stewardship is really leaving our organization, leaving what we found better than we came into it, right? And
Mhm.
so as I think about 2025, and we talked a little bit about coaching and some of the things that we've started to roll out, we're really looking at what we were going to be calling our Gandy Forward initiative. So that's really extending the aspects that we've started to build into our existing culture. Not only thinking about leadership development and safety training that's now starting to be more embedded into the culture within our highway department, but then going broader than that, thinking about recognition, bringing people back to the table at all levels within our organization, because we know that leaders aren't just born into it. They don't just necessarily get in those positions. They oftentimes come from within the ranks in our organization. And so we want to further cultivate pathways for folks who are looking to become more leaders within our position or within Burnett County and give them those avenues to be able to take and grow.
Did
So
you
we're pretty
say
excited about some of the things that we're looking at putting in place. Definitely starting this year, but probably definitely through the next 3 or 4 years, I anticipate us taking.
And did you say Gandy Forward?
It's called the Gandy Forward Initiative. So we have the Gandy Trail that comes through Burnett County.
Yes.
Um, and it's kind of interesting. A Gandy dancer was a railroad section hand, so somebody that worked on the railroad. And the tool that they used was a Gandy. And so they would kind of dance back and forth together to be able to put the rail back in place. And so making sure we can cultivate a team that works in unison like that. So when we see small things that start to go awry in our organization, or there's areas that we need to correct, whether it's in HHS or highway, hopefully the entire leadership team, all 21 of us across the department can come together and act like Gandy dancers and help that particular department get back on track, get back on focus and realign the tracks.
I love it. It's a great metaphor, the Gandy dancer. I did not know. I've heard the phrase. I did not know that's what it was. So thanks for educating me and probably the rest of our listeners here. How about challenges, Nate? I know you've had them, 11 years up there. What are one or two of the top challenges you see as you look into the coming year here, or the coming years, as I know you like to think down the road?
Yeah. I think challenges, especially when we look across our workforce, um, some I think buy into more of the cultural aspect and a larger degree of service in what we do here in the public sector. But of course, we have folks that maybe look a little bit more at just the dollar in their pocket. And so blending, those different mindsets and trying to come up with a program that fits the entirety of our organization is always a challenge. We don't want one department pointing a finger at another because that's not healthy for the organization. It's certainly not healthy for those individuals working in there. And
Mhm.
so working with especially our highway department to help them better understand how their work on a section of roadway really has a long-term beneficial impact for the users, the commerce within our community, tourism, the safety of those that are getting on the school buses each and every day. And so helping them better understand their individual work, which might seem mindless to them at points in time or might not seem as important to the big picture, absolutely is to the entirety of Burnett County. So we're really spending a lot of time working with our highway department, specifically helping them understand their role, the significance of it, and how well it fits in with the overall picture of Burnett County.
How often are you losing workers because they're going to get paid a buck or two more an hour somewhere else? Is that a thing happening?
It is. It certainly was more significant during the Great Resignation a couple of years ago. We've started to see people wanting to stay longer, or at least expressing to us they want to, and we haven't had the turnover rates like we did back in 2021, 2022. So hopefully that continues to be a trend moving forward. But it's always going to be something that's on our radar. We're a small community. We can't compete with some of the private sector construction companies that exist not only within Burnett County, but certainly closer to the Twin Cities.
How important is it that you guys have healthy work culture where people feel they belong, where they're rewarded, recognized? How important is that to keeping people, Nate?
Incredibly important. Um, that's the number one thing that we're after. We know that,
Mhm.
wages can be important, but what's more important is the people that they work with, their sense of belonging, how they feel when they leave their
Yeah.
when they leave their work at night and go home to their families. And
Yeah.
so we want them to understand that we're here to support our staff, not only from the standpoint of wages, but in their personal lives, things that they may need. That work-life balance is really important to us, and making sure we accommodate staff and their family situations is important.
Hmm. So culture, I love that. How the fact that they go home safe and how they feel when they go home. That's
Mhm.
lovely. I don't always hear that. That's an interesting extension of that idea. Culture is, it's formed by the decisions, behaviors, values of the leaders. In what ways do you see leaders influencing outcomes, especially safety or quality work or uh, you know, keeping a high standard for a healthy work culture? And what ways do you see leaders influencing those? And how do you foster that kind of environment, Nate, as the senior leader there?
I had a department head meeting just a couple weeks ago, and one of the first things I challenged them on was to close their eyes and to remember what it was like their first day, their first week, and their first month on the job. We tend to lose, I think, that viewpoint really quickly. We get entrenched in the existing organization and we fail to remember what that was like. And I think it can be really helpful for us because normally, after 11 years, I can tell you that I probably don't listen as well as I did the first month I was here. And listening is huge to understand that culture that you're walking into. Without understanding the culture, you're not going to be able to have probably a really good influence to be able
Hmm.
to change some of those outcomes that you would like to see happen within
Hmm.
the organization. So
Hmm.
reminding my leaders to think through that particular lens of first day, first week, first month, I think is key. And then listening, in those points of time. So one example I can tell you when I came to Burnett County was realizing in listening to staff, there was a ton of amazing ideas that our general staff members had, but they didn't necessarily have an avenue in order to explore
Hmm.
those particular ideas and how to implement them and move them forward into the organization. So we created what we call our LEEDS program, a leadership through effective and efficient design. So that's simply for our non-supervisory staff to have an avenue to bring their ideas forward each year to get considered as part of future budget cycles that
Hmm.
then we move and put in place. They've brought some of the best ideas that have really helped our culture solidify around importance of technology, importance of bringing forth ideas that might seem awkward or strange or not necessarily accepted in the public sector, and blowing those doors open that no idea is a bad idea, and we're going to look at supporting all of those, whether they get chosen or not. We want our staff to feel comfortable bringing things like that forward.
So it's all good. You mentioned when we talked another time about something called the LEAD program that you developed. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's what I just kind of mentioned here was our LEEDS program. So it's leadership through effective and efficient designs. So it's an annual competition that we hold here, and it is for non-supervisory staff. They have to work in teams, so they can work in teams within their department or cross departmentals in order to come up with ideas that lead to more effective or efficient service delivery. So we've come up with, or staff has come up with different aspects of technology that we put in place that has created more effective and efficient workflows. One of our ideas a couple of years ago that came out of our forestry department was to build a camper cabin and generate some additional revenue by bringing people into our forests and being able to see it and experience it within our own camper cabin that our staff constructed, put in place, and it's been wildly successful with the
Wow.
public and those coming to Burnett County. So, it's
Wow.
things like that that people then really take ownership and pride in, and they know that they've left a mark here in Burnett County that's probably going to last for a generation or more.
Well, and maybe you answered my last question, Nate, but I was going to ask you to tell a story of a successful change effort, but building a cabin generating revenue seems pretty impressive. Is there a different story you want to have? Something that you started, that you created that was successful, or even more interesting to me, something that maybe failed or didn't go the way you wanted? Um, and I know you're a humble leader. You probably think you want to tell me you don't really see yourself as a leader or the only leader, a key leader, but let's say you're one of many people working together. Any sort of change effort, because the work of building culture is the work of what somebody recently said. We don't use the word change anymore. Nobody likes change. We call it enhancement. So whatever you call it. Do you have a story of enhancement or change?
You know, as I kind of sit here and think about Tom a little bit, I can tell you that, we as leaders, we make mistakes all the time. And thankful that we have other people that help catch us, keep us in check, things along those lines.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
this kind of makes me think of when I first started here, I had a highway commissioner, and in 11 years, I've had a couple other ones. We just haven't been able to keep them. And, we had an individual kind of coming through the ranks that definitely had a desire. And, I wasn't quite sure. And I think I had some blinders on at the time of whether or not this person was going to be probably the best fit for the organization. And so that individual put his name in the hat to be considered. And I actually sat down with him prior to the interviews, and I said, you know what, would you mind pulling your name out of the hat? I said, I'm just not quite sure you're ready yet. And that was a really challenging conversation. And I really felt like, I was trying to support him the best I could and our organization and kind of what my thoughts were and ideas were for the culture of that organization. And he
Mm.
said, no, I'm not going to do that. And it immediately turned in my mind, there was something that shifted and said, okay, I'm not seeing something clearly here. And so we went through the process, and that individual ended up getting the position. And we rallied around him. We provided as much support as we possibly could, and he's just grown leaps and bounds, unlike anything I would ever expected. And so, really, for me, the takeaway is, you can have an idea of culture and the staff or those skill sets you might desire first to be able to have that change that you're desiring for an outcome. But don't overlook those that are right in front of you as well. And sometimes we as leaders, especially like I mentioned earlier, those that have been in our positions for a long period of time, we forget about that first day, that first look at somebody, really reviewing them and seeing them clearly and without any other stories that might be out there or nuance or any of those particular things. And so, for me, it was a reminder that I need to make sure I provide second, third, maybe fourth glances at people and don't discount them just because of bad experience or perhaps something that was stated to me over the course of my tenure here. So I've learned a lot. And that's not easy to talk about, but it was a significant mistake on my part. But I'm really glad the way that things have worked out, and I've learned a lot from that experience, probably a lot more than that other individual has.
I love the story, Nate. It's a great story, and we've all made mistakes, and that is not one that cost any lives or created
No.
something. I mean, I know plenty of people in construction made a mistake and somebody was maimed or died from it. So at least it wasn't on anywhere near that level, but it still stings the ego to admit
Yeah.
we were maybe our view wasn't the view that needed to happen. And you were open to the correction or open to the feedback. I think that's a great quality you have as a leader, to be open to somebody saying, well, I'm not going to pull my name out of the hat. I would call that strong psychological rank. When you
Yeah.
tell a senior person you're not going to pull the name out, you really want the job. But I think that's a great story of what we all need to be aware of, is that we all can not see things accurately, that we all need to be open to feedback, no matter how seasoned we are. There's another idea, there's another perspective, and how to welcome that, um, and then go with it, right? Not only admit, oh, I was wrong or that was a mistake, but to then support what is then happening is a it's a gift. So brilliant, Nate. Any final thoughts you have as we're wrapping this up here? Final comment?
I appreciate what you're doing, Tom. I've had a chance to see some of the other ones um, that have come out as well in terms of your conversations with others, and I'm learning a lot. And so keep doing what you're doing, and I hope that our relationship continues to blossom as well in the future.
Likewise, Nate. Thank you for engaging me, for being willing to be here and engaging me in Burnett County. It's been a joy to work with some of your people. All right. Thank you. Bye bye to everybody. Thanks for listening.